12 men in a room. They talk over each other. Correct. Interrupt. Defend. Each one desperate to be heard, convinced that volume equals value. But in the corner, one man says nothing. He watches. He listens. He lets the noise pass. And when the dust settles, everyone looks to him. Not because he spoke last, but because he didn't speak at all. Silence is not the absence of strength. It's the proof that you don't need to prove. Marcus Aurelius said, "Words don't make you wise. Actions do." So ask yourself, in the next moment of tension, will you argue like the 12? Or command the room like the one? One silence is the weapon of the strong. In a world where everyone rushes to speak, those who remain silent stand out. Not because they lack words, but because they don't need validation. When you speak less, you observe more. When you resist the urge to react, you regain control over the one thing no one can take from you, your mind. The Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." He didn't mean you should turn the other cheek in weakness. He meant that your greatest strength is restraint, choosing not to mirror chaos with more chaos. In modern life, silence isn't just a virtue. It's a strategy. At work, the loudest voice isn't always the one people respect. In conflict, those who remain calm control the tempo. In relationships, it's not about saying the perfect thing, it's about showing up with presence, not panic. Silence doesn't mean indifference. It means discipline. It means you understand that not every opinion needs your response, not every insult deserves your attention, and not every battle is worth your peace. To be silent is not to withdraw from the world, it's to engage with it on your own terms. So here's the challenge. Today, when someone irritates you, pause. Don't reply. Don't justify. Just observe. Notice what happens. Not to them. To you. You'll feel the urge to defend, to correct, to explain. Let it pass. Because when you learn to be silent in the face of provocation, you realize something profound. Your silence unsettles the insecure. Your calm confuses the chaotic. And your stillness? It's louder than their shouting. Ask yourself, if I stay quiet right now, am I losing, or am I finally winning? Tomorrow, we go deeper. We'll talk about why the ones who talk the most often understand the least, and how to use that to your advantage. Stay grounded. Stay sharp. Stay silent. To the less you say, the more you see. Silence is not the end of communication. It's the beginning of perception. Following from yesterday's challenge, to pause before reacting, let's now go further. What happens when you say less, not just in moments of conflict, but in every room you walk into? The truth is this: when you remove your need to speak, you unlock your capacity to see. You stop trying to perform. You start to perceive. And most importantly, you begin to listen, not just to others, but to yourself. Seneca once wrote, "It is a great thing to know the season for speech and the season for silence." Most men only learn how to speak louder. Few ever master when not to speak at all. Think about the men you admire. The truly grounded ones. They don't rush to dominate a conversation. They don't interrupt. They don't need to prove their intelligence, because they're secure enough to let others reveal themselves first. And that's the secret. The more you speak, the more you reveal. The more you listen, the more you learn. We often believe control comes from asserting ourselves, making our point, winning the exchange. But the man who listens patiently, who withholds judgment, who observes before he responds, he holds the real power. In business, that power lets you read the room, see the gaps, and anticipate before others do. In relationships, it builds trust, because people feel safe around someone who doesn't rush to speak, judge, or fix. But it requires humility. You have to resist the ego that wants to jump in, show off, take space. You have to embrace the quiet discomfort of being the one who says little, but sees much. Here's your discipline for the day. For every conversation you enter, commit to speaking last. Let others fill the space. Let them talk. Let them explain. And as they do, watch. You'll be amazed at how quickly people reveal who they are when you don't interrupt them. Their fears. Their ambitions. Their insecurities. Their patterns. You don't need to dig. Just be still. Be silent. Because silence is not empty. It's a mirror, and most people can't stand looking into it. This is what Stoicism teaches us. To speak with intention. To listen without ego. To observe without attachment. And to know that in every room, the one who understands the most is not the one who speaks the most, but the one who listens, quietly, with clarity. So ask yourself, what do I learn about people when I stop trying to make them understand me? What do I learn about myself when I stop needing to be heard? Practice that today. Hold back your words. Expand your awareness. And tomorrow, we'll explore the most powerful form of non-reaction, when silence becomes your strongest reply to insult, provocation, and chaos. Until then, walk into each room with quiet confidence. And leave with knowledge no loud voice could ever gain. 3. When you don't react, you reclaim your mind. You're in a meeting. Someone throws a passive-aggressive jab your way. Maybe they question your idea, your judgment, your value, without saying it outright. Your body tenses. You feel the heat rise. Every part of you wants to respond. But you don't. Not because you're weak. Because you've trained yourself not to hand over your power for free. You pause. You breathe. You observe. And in that moment, something subtle but profound happens. You reclaim your mind. That's the Stoic way, not to escape the world, but to move through it untouched by what does not serve your higher self. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. We read that quote. We nod. But living it? That's the real work. Let's be honest, most men spend their lives reacting. To criticism. To praise. To pressure. It's like being a puppet with invisible strings. Anyone who knows where to poke can make you move, make you dance, make you lose yourself. But the Stoic doesn't react. He responds, deliberately, selectively, and only when necessary. And often, not at all. Because he knows that not reacting is still a response. And often, it's the strongest one. Think about this. What if every time someone tried to provoke you, they failed? What if your calm made them uncomfortable? What if your stillness forced them to confront their own instability? This is what happens when you master your response. You stop being controlled. You become the one in control. But here's the thing, it's not natural. It's not easy. It's not automatic. It has to be trained. Repeated. Refined. So here's your mental rep for today. Anytime you feel an emotional trigger, pause for 5 seconds. You can do it in a conversation, over text, in traffic, at work, with your partner. Just count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. During that pause, ask yourself, if I act now, will I respect myself tomorrow? Is this response worthy of the man I'm trying to become? What would the strongest version of me do right now? You'll find that 80% of the time, the answer is silence. And the remaining 20%? You'll speak, not to defend, but to clarify. Not to dominate, but to set direction. This 5-second pause rewires your brain. It slows the automatic reflex. And slowly, your mind stops being a battlefield and becomes a sanctuary. Look, the world is loud. Everyone's shouting. Everyone's trying to win arguments, clap back, defend their name, be heard. But most of them are just reacting, fighting shadows, not shaping substance. You don't need to be part of that. You can be the still point in a spinning world. You can be the one man in the room who doesn't flinch, doesn't break, doesn't chase validation. You just need to pause. Not forever, just long enough to choose clarity over chaos. And that choice? It changes everything. 4. Presence over performance, the quiet authority of a Stoic man. You've practiced the pause. You've held your tongue. You've seen how silence becomes a shield. Now it's time to understand something even greater. Your presence speaks louder than anything you say. In a world obsessed with performance, who talks best, who sells hardest, who wins the room, the Stoic man walks in and says nothing, and somehow, everyone still notices. Not because he's trying to be noticed, but because he's grounded. There's a power in stillness that can't be faked. It comes from a man who knows who he is. He doesn't posture. He doesn't over-explain. He doesn't advertise his worth. Because his worth is evident in how he carries himself, not in what he says. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." Let that sink in. Not talk about it. Not defend it. Just be one. It's a quiet confidence that can't be borrowed. You can't fake it. You can't mimic it from a YouTube reel or a motivational post. It's cultivated from within. This kind of presence disorients people because they expect performance. They expect the same energy they bring, defensive, loud, performative. But when you bring the opposite, centered, calm, anchored, they have nothing to push against. And in that confusion, you gain the advantage without lifting a finger. This doesn't mean you avoid speaking. It means your silence makes your words carry weight. Because when you're not constantly trying to prove something, people assume you have something. That's the paradox of presence. The less you demand attention, the more you command it. In practice, this starts with your body. Straight spine. Shoulders relaxed, not puffed. Slow, steady breath. Unrushed movements. Intentional eye contact, not to dominate, but to see clearly. And when you speak, fewer words. Lower tone. No filler. It's not about acting alpha. It's about being undisturbed. People read energy before they hear language. They can tell when a man is desperate to impress, and when a man is simply rooted in something deeper. So here's what to do today. In every room you enter, practice being fully present, but say as little as possible. Let others talk. Listen, but don't nod anxiously to prove you're engaged. If you disagree, pause before you say anything. Ask yourself, do I need to speak right now? Or do I need to understand more? Observe how others begin to orbit around your calm. Watch how your silence shifts the room. Not because you're holding power over them, but because you're holding power over yourself. And that self-possession? It's rare. It's quiet. And it's unforgettable. Ask yourself this again and again. Am I performing or am I present? You'll know the answer not by what you say, but by how little you feel the need to. 5. The space between words, where truth reveals itself. You've tasted the strength of the pause. You've walked into a room without trying to dominate it, and still, the energy shifted toward you. Now, we move into something even more subtle and even more powerful. Making space. Not physical space. Not social distance. But psychological space, the kind that opens up when you don't rush to fill the silence. When you choose to observe instead of interrupt. When you let others speak, not because you agree, but because you're learning. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." But here's something few understand. We also reveal more in speech than we intend, especially when we're given room to keep talking. That's the strategic power of silence. It creates a space so clean, so unintrusive, that the truth can't help but walk into it. Here's what you'll notice. People start oversharing, not because you asked, but because your silence invites it. They reveal their insecurities, motivations, contradictions, sometimes within a single sentence. They mistake your listening for agreement, and in doing so, show their full hand. Most men can't handle that kind of silence. They panic. They interrupt. They redirect. Why? Because silence puts a mirror in front of them, and not everyone is ready to see their reflection. But the Stoic is. He doesn't just tolerate silence, he wields it. Not to manipulate. Not to trap. But to understand. To navigate relationships, power dynamics, conflict, leadership, with clarity, not noise. This is how the Stoic becomes a strategist in every room he enters. Because while others are busy trying to be heard, he's learning exactly how to respond, or whether to respond at all. So here's what to practice today. Choose one conversation, personal or professional, and say 50% less than you normally would. That doesn't mean be passive. It means be deliberate. Let people speak. Don't fill gaps. Resist the urge to jump in with your story, your fix, your take. Instead, ask one question, tell me more. Then say nothing. Watch what unfolds. Most people are so unused to real attention, they'll mistake it for trust. And in that comfort, they'll open up far more than they planned. That's when the Stoic listens, not just with ears, but with eyes, breath, posture. Not to collect information, but to read character. To feel intention. To see behind the words. Because here's the truth. People always reveal themselves if you're quiet long enough. Not just their story, but their self-discipline, their worldview, their pain, their ego. And the man who can sit in that space without needing to jump in. He learns the most. He leads the best. He suffers the least. Ask yourself, do I listen to respond, or do I listen to understand? Can I be still long enough for others to show me who they really are? Practice this today. Choose the silence. Choose the space. Because in the space between their words, you'll finally hear the truth. And tomorrow, we'll flip the mirror inward. 6. The battle within, ego versus integrity. You've sat in silence long enough to see others clearly. Now it's time to face the hardest person to observe, the one you carry everywhere. Yourself. Because all the outer calm in the world means nothing if it masks an inner chaos. And every Stoic man, if he's honest, must admit, the loudest voice he ever has to silence is his own ego. Epictetus warned, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. This is the fatal blind spot. The ego convinces you you've arrived. That you know enough. That you're above being corrected, questioned, challenged. It tells you that silence is enough, that as long as you appear composed, you are composed. But silence without self-examination is just performance. And the Stoic doesn't perform. He purifies. You see, this path isn't about becoming untouchable. It's about becoming undivided. Where your inner world and outer presence align, not perfectly, but truthfully. Because here's the truth. You can stay quiet and still be boiling inside. You can appear strong and still be addicted to approval. You can say nothing and still lose yourself in a storm of imagined slights, invisible competitions, and emotional loops. That's not Stoicism. That's ego dressed in minimalism. So what does the real work look like? It starts with radical honesty. Not with others. With yourself. It's the moment you admit. You've reacted to prove you're right, not because it was necessary. You've used calm as a mask, not as a mirror. You've stayed silent not out of strength, but because you feared conflict, exposure, rejection. There is no shame in this. Only opportunity. Because once you stop defending the performance, you can begin the real fight, the only one that matters. The fight between the man you are and the man you said you'd be. And this battle? It doesn't take place in the boardroom or online or at the dinner table. It takes place in the quiet moments. The choices no one sees. The thoughts you never say out loud. It's every time you resist the urge to explain yourself. to impress, to retaliate. It's every time you let truth win over pride. And here's something few admit. The ego will scream the loudest the moment you start ignoring it. It will tempt you to prove them wrong. It will whisper, they need to know your side. It will say, don't let them get away with that. But the Stoic doesn't answer the ego. He observes it. He names it. He chooses silence, not out of passivity, but out of alignment. Because the man who doesn't need to win externally is the man who has already won internally. So here's your discipline today. Spend 10 minutes alone, without your phone, and ask yourself one question. Where am I still trying to win approval? Be ruthless. Be real. Write it down if you can. Because clarity doesn't come from silence alone, it comes from reflection inside that silence. And if this journey is stirring something in you, something deeper than noise, deeper than opinion, subscribe. Not because I need numbers, but because every man should have a place where ego isn't the teacher, where stillness isn't weakness, and where the strongest men are the ones who speak last, because they've already conquered the only battlefield that matters. Tomorrow, we'll turn back to the outside world and explore what happens when your calm starts to make other people uncomfortable. Because sometimes, the greatest threat in the room is the man who refuses to react. 7. The stillness that shakes others. Why calm is a form of power. By now, you've tasted the internal battle. You've seen the tug-of-war between your ego and your values. You've noticed how silence becomes both shield and sword, not just protection from others, but mastery of self. Now you're ready to handle what comes next. The discomfort your calm creates in others. Here's the paradox every Stoic must be ready for. The more grounded you become, the more ungrounded others will feel around you. Not because you're attacking, but because your stillness exposes their storm. And not everyone is ready to meet themselves in that mirror. Seneca said, if a man knows not which port he sails, no wind is favorable. But when you walk into a room steady, self-contained, unmoved by external tides, you reveal, without trying, how aimless most people truly are. You don't need to correct them. You don't need to confront them. You just need to hold your posture, mentally, emotionally, physically. And they'll feel it. Some will respect it. Some will resent it. But all of them will notice. Let's be clear, this isn't about being intimidating. This isn't about power games. This is about energetic contrast. Most people operate in reaction. They speak before they think. They defend before they listen. They inflate before they reflect. So when you don't flinch, when you just breathe and remain rooted, it scrambles their framework. They expect a push, a pull, a reaction they can latch onto. And when they get none, they feel lost. And in that space, something remarkable happens. You become the most influential man in the room, not because you try to lead, but because you don't need to. You become a reference point, a measure, a weight of presence that recalibrates the tone, the tempo, even the tension. But this kind of calm isn't natural. It's trained. It's tested. And that test often comes when your silence is misread as arrogance, as coldness, as weakness. Let them think that. Let them guess. Because the man who needs to be understood is still negotiating with his ego. But the man who stands silent, content in his own alignment, he's not playing the same game. Here's what to practice today. Choose one social setting, work, family, group interaction, and do not try to manage anyone's perception of you. Don't fill silences. Don't adjust your energy to match theirs. Don't laugh just to be polite. Don't nod when you disagree. Just be. Let your presence speak. Let your stillness stand. You'll notice things. Some people will fidget more. Some will challenge you subtly, trying to poke, provoke, dry you out. Some will try harder to impress you. And through it all, you remain unmoved. Not distant. not disengaged. Just sovereign. Because you're not there to dominate the room. You're there to embody your own principle. That's the Stoic path. It's not the loud man who shifts the room. It's the one who doesn't move, and in not moving, moves everything around him. Ask yourself, does my presence bring peace or pressure? Do I react to discomfort or hold space for it? You are not responsible for how your calm makes others feel. You are responsible for preserving it. Because that calm is a fortress you've built brick by brick. Don't let anyone inside just because they knock loudly. And if this challenge resonates, if you've seen this happen in your own life, write it down tonight. Capture one moment today where you held your ground. That's not ego. That's evidence. Proof of the man you are becoming. 8. Guard your fire. Not everything deserves your energy. You've learned to pause before reacting. You've walked into rooms without performing. You felt the tension when your calm unsettles others. Now it's time to master the next layer of stillness, protection of energy. Let's get real. Every day, people will try to pull you into battles that don't belong to you. Arguments that feed their ego, not your clarity. Conversations that lead nowhere. Crises that aren't yours to fix. And if you don't choose where your energy goes, the world will choose for you. You'll end your day exhausted, not because you worked hard, but because you leaked power into moments that never deserved it. Marcus Aurelius said, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. That's the Stoic advantage. Not avoidance. Not detachment. But discernment. There's a difference. Avoidance says, I can't deal with this. Detachment says, this doesn't matter. But discernment says, this is not worthy of the man I'm becoming. The Stoic doesn't avoid life. He doesn't pretend to be above struggle. He simply refuses to react to everything. Because not everything deserves a piece of him. And here's where most men fail, not because they lack strength, but because they lack focus. They give their attention away like it's infinite. Arguing online with people they'll never meet. Defending themselves to people who'll never understand. Explaining their values to people who don't even live by their own. They burn out, not from pressure, but from scattered intensity. And then they wonder why their goals feel blurry. Why their relationships feel shallow. Why their life feels off. It's not that they're not trying. It's that they're trying everywhere. But a Stoic man? He knows where to aim and where to walk away. He trains himself to respond only when it's aligned with his principle, not his impulse. So how do you build this discipline? Start simple. Choose one person today who always drains your energy. When they bait you into a reaction, pause. And say to yourself, this is not worth my fire. Then do nothing. Don't respond. Don't defend. Don't correct. Let them keep speaking. Let them spiral. You've already won. Because you've protected what they were trying to hijack, your attention. You'll feel the pull, that voice inside that says, say something. Defend yourself. Don't let them think they're right. That's not strength talking. That's your ego trying to get its fix. But when you withhold your reaction, when you choose preservation over participation, you step into something sacred. Self-possession. It's not the man who fights every battle that wins the war. It's the man who only fights when it matters. And lets everything else die in the silence. Ask yourself, where have I been spending energy that yields no return? Which conversations feel urgent, but leave me empty? Write them down. Not to shame yourself, but to see clearly. Because awareness is the first step to conservation. Your energy is your most limited currency. You can't manufacture more of it. You can only spend it better. So today, spend it like it matters. Not on noise. Not on shadows. Not on ego battles dressed as important conversations. spend it on clarity, on action, on presence. And tomorrow, CTA 9, we'll explore what happens when your voice finally does enter the room. How the Stoic man, who speaks rarely, ensures that when he does, people listen. Because silence isn't forever. It's preparation. Let me know when you're ready to continue. 9. When the Stoic speaks, why rare words reshape the room. There will come a moment, maybe today, maybe next week, when you'll realize your silence has done its job. You've observed. You've withheld. You've listened deeply, chosen your battles, guarded your fire. And now, it's time to speak. This is where most people go wrong. They spend so long talking that when something important does come up, no one listens. They've diluted their presence with noise. Their words are just more static in a crowded room. But the Stoic man is different. Because he has mastered restraint. His speech carries weight. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Let no one have it in their power to say truthfully of you that you are not simple or that you are not good. If anyone thinks that of you, let your life be such that it will rebut him." But sometimes, the rebuttal must be spoken. Not out of defense. Not out of anger. But out of clarity. Because when a Stoic finally speaks, it is not to prove. It is to pierce. To clarify a boundary. To illuminate a truth. To redirect a ship that's drifting. And those moments? They matter. Because when you rarely speak, your voice feels like signal in a world full of static. People stop. They tune in. Not because you've shouted, but because your silence before this made them listen now. Here's the mistake many make at this stage. They break silence with either force or fury. They speak as if they've been storing up anger. Or they use their voice to reassert ego, not to serve truth. But the Stoic? He speaks with precision. With principle. With pace. His words are measured, not withheld. They're sharp, not loud. They're designed to move, not impress. This is what leadership sounds like. Not constant advice. Not never-ending input. But strategic presence, voiced only when it adds clarity, never confusion. Let's be practical now. Today, find one moment where your natural instinct is to jump in verbally, and instead, wait. Not forever. Just long enough to notice your motive. Clean up your tone. Ask yourself, am I speaking to solve or to be seen? Then say less, but say it cleaner. A short sentence. A question that reframes. A clear boundary without threat. And after you speak, let the silence hang. Don't fill it. Let your words echo. Let others respond. This is when you'll feel your voice shift from noise to gravity. It won't be dramatic. No spotlight. No applause. But you'll notice people lean in. And more importantly, you'll respect what you said. Because it came from alignment, not impulse. You'll walk away knowing. I said what needed to be said. Nothing more. And in a world where almost every man is trying to be heard, you've become the one who only speaks when it matters, and is remembered because of it. Ask yourself, have I earned the right to speak through my silence? Are my words clarifying or cluttering? If I only had one sentence to shape this moment, what would it be? Practice this not once, but often. Because the man who speaks less, but speaks with depth, becomes the man others follow, not because they're told to, but because they want to. 10. The silent flame, emotional mastery without suppression. We've gone through 9 layers of silence. Each one stripping back the noise. Each one sharpening the man beneath the mask. But now we arrive at the deepest truth of all. The Stoic man is not unemotional. He is emotionally sovereign. That distinction changes everything. Because let's be honest, most people misunderstand Stoicism. They think it's about coldness, numbness, apathy. They hear the word silence and assume you've turned off your heart. But real Stoicism has never been about pretending you don't feel. It's about learning to feel without being ruled by those feelings. Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity. For he is not permitted to prove himself." Modern adversity isn't just war or disaster. It's everyday insult, rejection, misunderstanding. It's that look, that message, that tone, that judgment. And the Stoic doesn't pretend it doesn't sting. He simply chooses not to bleed on the floor for it. He allows the emotion to move through him like weather. He doesn't trap it. He doesn't suppress it. He doesn't explode or implode. He lets it rise, name it for what it is, anger, fear, disappointment, and then he lets it go. No drama. No denial. Just discipline. This is emotional mastery. And it's rare. Because the world keeps feeding men two false choices. React wildly. Let anger, anxiety, ego, or shame explode. Say too much. Do too much. Suppress completely. Bury it. Numb it. Pretend nothing affects you until it corrodes your relationships and your own sense of being alive. But there is a third path. The Stoic path. It sounds like this. Yes, I felt disrespected. But I don't need to prove anything right now. Yes, that triggered me. But that's my responsibility to process, not theirs to fix. Yes, I'm angry. But I'm not handing my power to that anger. I'm using it. This is not detachment. It's refinement. Like fire held in the palm, no longer wild, but still burning. And when you operate from this place, everything changes. Your relationships deepen because people feel safe around your steadiness. Your leadership sharpens because your emotions don't leak into every decision. Your self-respect rises because you are no longer a hostage to internal weather. So here's your final practice in this series. Today, when you feel an emotional spike, don't suppress. Don't react. Just pause, close your eyes, and name it. Literally say in your mind, this is irritation. This is jealousy. This is fear. Then ask, what triggered this? What value of mine feels threatened? Can I sit with this without solving it right now? You'll be surprised. Naming the emotion neutralizes its grip. It's no longer a ghost. It becomes a guest. You don't ignore it. You host it briefly. And then you let it leave without letting it wreck the house. That's what Stoicism always was. Not coldness. Not quiet suffering. But full presence with your experience and zero compulsion to act on it. That's the final form of silence. The kind that doesn't cut you off from life. It anchors you deeper in it. So ask yourself, before we end this series, am I running from my feelings or riding them? Does my silence protect my power or bury my truth? What emotion do I fear showing because I haven't yet learned to hold it? You've come this far. And if you've done the work, read, reflected, practiced, then you've already begun the transformation. You're not just speaking less. You're feeling clearer. You're not just silent. You're still. And stillness, real stillness, is a man's final victory over a world that's always trying to stir him up. If this journey has grounded you, if it has opened something inside you you weren't naming before, let me know with one word that captures your inner shift. It could be clarity, strength, ownership, your word, your signal, your stance. And if you want to continue this inner discipline, to go beyond content into a way of being, you know where to find this space. Subscribe, not for tips, but for reminders of who you are beneath distraction. This isn't about finishing a video. It's about starting a way of life. Stay strong. Stay sovereign. Stay still. Let me know if you want a closing summary or to start a new series from here.